The Great Hall of Axiom Prime stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, and the ceiling rose, so high that clouds actually formed near the top, drifting lazily through the artificial atmosphere that the elder species preferred for their gatherings. Ambassador Helena Vasquez stood alone at the center of the speaker's platform, her dark uniform a stark contrast against the shimmering white floor that seemed to glow with its own inner light around her. Arranged in 12 ascending tiers sat the representatives of the Galactic Concord, the alliance that had ruled this section of the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. The Valkyrie delegation occupied the highest tier, their massive wings folded behind them like cloaks of living silver, their compound eyes reflecting Helena's tiny figure 1,000 times over. Below them sat the Cathari, their eye stalks swaying gently as they communicated through subtle movements that humans had never fully learned to read. The other 10 species filled the remaining tiers, each one ancient, each one powerful, and each one looking down at the human ambassador with expressions ranging from contempt to mild curiosity. High Counselor Vethrax of the Valkyrie rose from his seat, his wings spreading slightly to catch the attention of the assembled delegates. The tribunal has reached its decision, he announced, his voice carrying through the vast chamber without any apparent effort. The species known as humanity has been judged and found incompatible with Concord society. Helena did not flinch, though she felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The charges are as follows, Vethrax continued. Excessive reproduction rates that threaten resource stability, aggressive territorial expansion, cultural inflexibility, and a documented tendency toward violence when confronted with opposition. A murmur rippled through the assembly, and Helena noticed several delegates nodding their heads or making equivalent gestures of agreement. Therefore, Vethrax declared, humanity is hereby ordered to vacate all 17 of its colony worlds within Concord space, effective immediately, with a maximum time frame of 60 standard cycles. Helena felt the words hit her like physical blows, but she kept her face carefully neutral. You have been allocated the region designated as Sector Omega-7, commonly known as the Dead Zones, as your new territory, Vethrax added. And Helena could hear the cruel satisfaction in his voice. This tribunal is concluded. I request the right to speak, Helena said, her voice cutting through the chamber with surprising strength. Vethrax's S-wings twitched with annoyance, but protocol demanded he allow her response. Speak then. Human, but be brief. Helena turned slowly, making eye contact with as many delegates as she could, knowing that most of them would not understand the significance of the gesture. 300 years ago, humanity looked up at the stars and dreamed of finding friends among them. She began. We built our first ships with hope in our hearts, and when we encountered the Concord, we believed that dream had come true. She paused, letting her words sink in. We asked for nothing but a chance to prove ourselves. We offered friendship, trade, and cooperation. We followed your laws, learned your customs, and tried in every way to be good neighbors. A Cathari delegate made a dismissive gesture with 2 of its tentacles, but Helena continued, and now you cast us out, not because we have done you harm, but because you fear what we might become. You look at our numbers and see a threat. You look at our adaptability and see danger. You look at our determination and see aggression. Your point, Ambassador. Vethrax interrupted. Helena turned to face him directly. My point, High Counselor, is that you are making a terrible mistake. Laughter erupted from several tiers, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. A mistake? Vethrax's S-wings spread wide in amusement. You are a young species, barely out of your cradle world, and you presume to lecture us about mistakes? I presume nothing, Helena replied. I am simply telling you what will happen. The laughter died down as the delegates sensed something different in her tone. You are sending 18 billion people into the dead zones. A region so hostile that not even your automated probes survive there for long. You believe this will be the end of us. She smiled then, a small, cold smile that made several nearby delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. But you do not understand humanity. You have studied our biology and our history and our technology, but you have never understood what makes us who we are. And what is that? A Cathari delegate asked, curiosity momentarily overcoming contempt. We survive, Helena said simply, when every other option is taken from us. When death seems certain, when hope itself seems foolish. We survive. It is what we do. It is what we have always done. She began walking toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The dead zones will not kill us. They will change us. They will make us harder, stronger, more determined than we have ever been before. She stopped at the threshold and turned back one final time. And one day, you will need us. I do not know when, and I do not know why. But someday a darkness will come that you cannot face alone. And on that day you will call out into the void, begging for help. Her eyes found Vethrax, and we will remember this moment. We will remember how you laughed, how you dismissed us, how you sent our children into the darkness to die. Is that a threat, Ambassador? Vethrax demanded. No, Helena said. It is a warning. There is a difference. You will understand that difference someday. And then she was gone, walking out of the great hall and out of Concord space forever. The Exodus began the following cycle, and it was the largest movement of people in human history. Ships of every size and description lifted off from 17 worlds, carrying families, supplies, hopes, and fears into the unknown. Helena watched from the bridge of the colony ship. New beginning as Earth itself grew small in the rear display. That pale blue dot that had been humanity's home for so long. Now just another star in the endless black. Where do we go from here? Her aide asked quietly. Forward, Helena replied. Always forward. The dead zones are not our grave. They are our crucible, and when we emerge from them, the galaxy will never look at humanity the same way again. She turned away from the display and faced the stars ahead. The unknown dangers, the impossible odds, the certain death that awaited so many of them, but also the chance, however small, to prove that humanity was more than the Concord believed. The ships accelerated into the darkness and behind them. The Galactic Concord celebrated, confident that they had solved a human problem once and for all. They had no idea how wrong they were. 200 years had passed since the Exodus, and in that time the Galactic Concord had grown comfortable in its power. The elder species rarely spoke of humanity anymore, and when they did, it was in the same tone one might use to discuss an extinct animal, something that had once existed but was now gone forever. A minor footnote in the great history of the galaxy. They held celebrations on the anniversary of the tribunal, congratulating themselves on their wisdom in removing the human threat before it could grow dangerous. But in the dead zones, far from the comfortable worlds of the Concord, something remarkable was happening. The first 50 years had been hell. The dead zones had earned their name through countless failed expeditions by elder species who had tried to colonize them over the millennia. Radiation storms swept through entire systems without warning. Gravitational anomalies crushed ships like paper. And predators, unlike anything humanity had ever faced, hunted the colonists on every world they tried to settle. 9 out of 10 colony attempts failed in the first decade. Sometimes the colonists died quickly from environmental hazards. Sometimes they died slowly from starvation or disease. And sometimes they simply vanished, leaving behind empty settlements and unanswered questions. But the 10th attempt succeeded, and then another, and another, and another. General Marcus Chun stood on the observation deck of the battleship Indomitable, looking out at the sprawling shipyards of New Geneva. the capital world of what humanity now called the Remnant. He was 62 years old. Born on a colony ship during the Exodus, raised on stories of the world his parents had been forced to leave behind. He had never seen Earth or any of the original 17 colonies. His entire life had been spent in the dead zones, fighting for survival, and what a fight it had been. The radiation storms had forced humanity to develop new shielding technology that the Concorde had declared impossible. The gravitational anomalies had led to breakthroughs in propulsion that would have taken centuries under normal circumstances. The Predators had created a generation of soldiers who knew no fear because they had faced things far worse. Then death. Humanity had not just survived the dead zones. They had conquered them. Status report. Chun said, without turning from the viewport. Shipyard 7 has completed the last of the Vengeance-class cruisers. His aide, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okonkwo, replied, "That brings our total fleet strength to 3,200 vessels. Crew readiness? All ships fully staffed, morale is high. The troops are eager." Chun nodded slowly, watching as a formation of fighters conducted exercises near the outer defensive perimeter. Those pilots were the best humanity had ever produced, trained from childhood for combat, equipped with technology that made Concorde weapons look like toys. "Any word from the listening posts?" he asked. "Nothing new from Concorde space," Okonkwo replied. "They still believe we are extinct. Their historians have officially classified humanity as a failed species." A thin smile crossed Chun's weathered face. "Good. Let them keep believing that." He turned from the viewport and walked toward the tactical display at the center of the deck. Holographic images showed the current disposition of human forces across the dead zones. 200 colony worlds now, nearly 40 billion people. An empire built from nothing in the most hostile region of the galaxy. "We could take them now," Okonkwo said quietly. "We have the ships, the weapons, the soldiers. The Concorde has grown soft. Their militaries are ceremonial at best. We could be at Axiom Prime within a month." Chun shook his head. "That is not why we built all of this." "Then why did we?" "To survive," Chun replied. "To ensure that no one can ever do to us what the Concorde did." "We are not conquerors, Lieutenant Commander. We are survivors." "There is a difference." Okonkwo looked unconvinced, but she held her tongue in truth. There were many among the remnant who shared her view. 2 centuries of suffering had created a deep well of anger toward the species that had cast humanity out. Many believed that vengeance was not just deserved but necessary, but the leadership had held firm to the principles established by Helena Vasquez before her death. Humanity would grow strong. Humanity would prepare for any threat. But humanity would not become the monsters the Concorde had believed them to be. What none of them knew, not Chun or Okonkwo or any of the billions of humans spread across the dead zones, was that a far greater threat was approaching at the center of the galaxy. In regions so ancient that even the elder species had forgotten their existence, something was stirring. The entity had many names among those few who remembered it. The Devourers, the Star Eaters, the Final Night. But most simply called it the Silence, because wherever it went, all other sounds ceased forever. It had slept for 100,000 years, waiting, growing, preparing for its next great harvest, and now was awake. The first signs appeared in systems so remote that no one noticed at first. Stars that had burned for billions of years suddenly went dark. Planets that had orbited peacefully for eons simply vanished. Ships that entered certain regions never returned by the time the Concorde realized what was happening. It was already too late, but in the dead zones, the listening post detected something the Concorde had missed. Strange energy readings from the galactic core, patterns that matched no known phenomenon. Signals that seemed almost purposeful in their approach. Chun studied the data with growing concern. "What do you make of this?" he asked the science officer. "Unknown, sir. But whatever it is big." and it is heading toward Concord space. Chun stared at the display for a long moment. Continue monitoring, he ordered, and increase readiness levels across the fleet. Are we preparing to help the Concord? Okonkwo asked, surprise evident in her voice. I do not know yet, Chen admitted. But Ambassador Vasquez made a promise 200 years ago. She said we would remember. She said they would need us someday. He turned back to the viewport, looking out at the fleet that humanity had built through blood and sacrifice and determination. Perhaps that day is coming sooner than anyone expected in the darkness between stars. The silence moved closer, and the galaxy that had cast humanity out was about to learn just how badly it had miscalculated. The Valkyrie homeworld of Crystalline Prime had stood for 12 million years, a jewel of civilization that predated most other sentient species in the galaxy. Its crystal spires reached toward the heavens like frozen prayers. Its floating cities drifted through skies of perpetual sunset. Its libraries contained knowledge accumulated over epochs that most species could not even comprehend. It fell in 6 hours. Counselor Xeran of the Axiom watched the final transmissions from his private chamber on the emergency station, where the Concord leadership had gathered, his multiple limbs trembling with a fear he had never experienced in his 3 centuries of life. The images showed black ships emerging from nowhere, vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, moving with a terrible purpose that suggested intelligence far beyond anything the Concord had encountered. The Valkyrie Defense Fleet, the pride of the Concord military, had engaged the invaders with everything they had. It made no difference. Weapons that could shatter moons simply vanished when they struck the black ships. Shields that had protected Valkyrie worlds for millennia collapsed like soap bubbles. Ships that tried to flee found themselves frozen in place by forces that defied every known law of physics. And then the black ships had descended on Crystalline Prime itself. The last image showed High Counselor Vethrax, descendant of the same Vethrax who had presided over humanity's exile 2 centuries earlier, standing in the great hall where that tribunal had been held, watching as darkness poured through the crystal walls like liquid shadow. Then the transmission ended, and one of the 12 founding species of the Galactic Concord simply ceased to exist. What are they? Someone asked in the emergency chamber, voiced high with terror. Unknown, the tactical AI responded, its normally calm voice carrying an undertone of something that might have been fear. The entities match no known species in our database. Their technology operates on principles we cannot identify. Their motivations are unclear, but their actions suggest total extermination of all sentient life. The Cathari fleet, another counselor said desperately. It is the largest armada ever assembled, 300,000 ships. Surely it can. The tactical display updated with new information. The Cathari armada engaged the enemy 4 hours ago. The AI reported. Contact was lost 17 minutes into the battle. Subsequent reconnaissance indicates complete destruction of all Cathari forces. The Cathari homeworld went dark approximately 2 hours ago. Silence fell over the chamber. A silence broken only by the quiet sounds of beings coming to terms with their own extinction. Xeran forced himself to speak. Show me the strategic map. The holographic display shifted to show the Concord territories, or what remained of them. Nearly 90% of Concord space was now marked in black. Worlds that had been home to trillions of beings. Civilizations that had flourished for millions of years. All of it simply gone. The remaining 10% clustered around the emergency station. A handful of systems that had not yet been reached. A few billion survivors from species that had once numbered in the trillions. How long? Xeran asked, at current rate of advance. The entities will reach our position in approximately 37 standard cycles. 37 days until the end of everything the Concord had built. There must be something we can do, a young Axiom diplomat pleaded. Some weapon we have not tried. Some alliance we have not considered. The ancient AI that managed the Concord archives flickered to life, its avatar appearing in the center of the chamber. There is one possibility, it said, its voice carrying the weight of centuries of accumulated knowledge. Tell us, Dexeron demanded. The entities appear to avoid certain regions of space. Our analysis indicates they have not entered the area known as the dead zones. Furthermore, historical records suggest that a previous manifestation of these entities was encountered by our ancestors approximately 100,000 years ago. What happened? Our ancestors fled to this region of space, abandoning their original territories. The entities did not pursue them into what they perceived as worthless space. The dead zones, Dexeron repeated. Understanding dawning. The humans, correct. If any of the exiled human population survived, they would have had 2 centuries to develop in an environment hostile to the entities. They may possess capabilities we do not. The humans are gone, another counselor snapped. We made certain of that when we exiled them. We made certain they left, the AI corrected gently. That is not the same as making certain they died. Humans have demonstrated remarkable resilience throughout their history. Dexeron stared at the map, at the spreading darkness that would consume them all in barely more than a month. What choice do we have? He asked quietly. We are facing extinction. Every weapon we possess has failed. Every strategy we have tried has been useless. If there is even a small chance that the humans survived, that they might be able to help us, we must take it. They will remember what we did to them, another counselor warned. They will remember the tribunal, the exile, the mockery. Why would they help us? I do not know, Dexeron admitted, but we must ask. We must try. Prepare a transmission on all frequencies. Aim it toward the dead zones. Tell them what has happened. Tell them we need their help. And if they refuse, then we die knowing we tried everything. The transmission was prepared and sent, a desperate plea broadcast into the void, begging for salvation from the very species the Concord had cast out. For 3 weeks there was no response. The darkness crept closer. More worlds fell. More species joined the extinction list. Hope faded with each passing day, and then, on the 22nd day, a single message returned. It arrived on every frequency simultaneously, cutting through Concord communications like a knife through silk. 2 words that meant everything and nothing at the same time. We remember. Dexeron read the message 100 times, trying to discern its meaning. Was it a refusal? Was it a promise of vengeance? Was it simply an acknowledgement that the transmission had been received? He did not know, but for the first time since the silence had appeared, he felt something that might have been hope somewhere in the dead zones. Humanity had heard their call, and humanity had answered. The Remnant Council chamber on New Geneva was filled with shouting. Admiral Yuki Vasquez stood at the center of the chaos, her grandmother's journal clutched in her hands, watching as humanity's leaders argued over the impossible question that had been placed before them. They cast us out like garbage, Admiral Petrov roared, his scarred face twisted with rage. They sent our ancestors into the dead zones to die. They laughed as millions perished in those first terrible years, and now they come begging for our help. I lost my entire family on Colony 7, General Morrison added, her voice cold with old grief. The radiation storms took them one by one while the Concords celebrated their golden age. I will not spend a single human life to save those monsters. Shouts of agreement echoed through the chamber. Yuki, let them rage. Understanding that this anger had been building for 2 centuries, passed down from parent to child like a bitter inheritance. Finally, when the noise began to subside, she raised her hand for silence. I have read the transmission from the Concord, she said. I have seen the tactical data they included. The entities they call the Silence have destroyed 90% of Concord space. Billions of beings are dead. Civilizations that existed for millions of years have been erased. Good. Someone muttered from the back of the chamber. Yuki's eyes found the speaker. A young captain who had never known anything but the dead zones. You say good, she replied quietly. You celebrate the deaths of billions of innocents. Children who had no part in the tribunal that exiled us. Families who knew nothing of our existence. Ordinary people who simply wanted to live their lives in peace. They benefited from our exile, the captain argued. They lived in comfort while we struggled to survive. So we should punish them for the sins of their ancestors. Yuki asked, we should condemn them to extinction for decisions made 200 years ago by beings who are long dead? She held up her grandmother's journal. Helena Vasquez stood before the Concord Tribunal and warned them that one day they would meet us. She told them we would remember, but she did not curse them. She did not promise vengeance. She simply stated a fact. Yuki opened the journal to a marked page. She wrote these words on the night before the Exodus began. I do not want humanity to be remembered as the species that let the galaxy burn because we were wronged. I want us to be remembered as the species that saved everything, even those who hurt us. Because that is who we truly are. The chamber fell silent. The Concord feared us because they thought we were violent and aggressive, Yuki continued. They believed we would become a threat to their way of life. They saw our determination and called it dangerous. She closed the journal. If we refuse to help them now, if we let them die when we have the power to save them, we prove them right. We become exactly what they feared. We become monsters. Admiral Petrov shook his head. You are asking us to sacrifice our people for those who wanted us dead. I am asking us to be better than they were, Yuki replied. I am asking us to show the galaxy what humanity truly is. The vote was called, and it was closer than Yuki had hoped. But in the end, humanity chose mercy over vengeance. 3,000 ships of the human remnant fleet emerged from slipspace above. Axiom Prime, 31 days after the Concord's desperate transmission. They arrived just as the vanguard of the Silence reached the system counselor Dexeron. Watched from the emergency station as the human fleet appeared. Vessels unlike anything the Concorde had ever seen. Massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons. Sleek cruisers moving in perfect formation. Fighters swarming like angry insects. They came, he whispered, unable to believe what he was seeing. They actually came. The human fleet did not hesitate. Admiral Vasquez's voice crackled across all frequencies. Calm and commanding. All Concorde vessels, fall back to defensive positions around the evacuation points. Human remnant fleet engaging the enemy now. The battle began. The Silence's black ships moved to intercept the humans, expecting another easy victory. Expecting weapons that would fail and shields that would collapse and enemies that would fall silent like all the others. They were wrong. Human weapons did not simply strike the black ships. They tore through them. Technology developed through 2 centuries of fighting the dead zones. Weapons designed to kill things that should not be possible to kill. The black ships adapted, as they always did, shifting their defenses to counter the human attacks. But the humans adapted too. Faster, more creatively, with a chaotic unpredictability that the Silence had never encountered. A Concorde captain, watching the battle from his damaged ship, saw a human cruiser deliberately ram a Silence vessel 3 times its size. The crew evacuating at the last moment as the ship's reactor overloaded. Why would they do that? He asked in disbelief. Why would they sacrifice themselves for us? A human voice answered through the communication channel. Tired and strained, but somehow still warm. Because someone has to. Because giving up is not in our nature. Because your lives matter, even if you once thought ours did not. The battle raged for hours. Human ships fell. Crews died. but for every human vessel destroyed, 3 silent ships were taken with them. The Concorde survivors watched in awe as humanity fought with a ferocity and determination they had never witnessed, and slowly, impossibly, the human fleet began to push the silence back. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, blood running from a cut on her forehead, watching as the enemy retreated for the first time in recorded history. "They are falling back," her tactical officer reported, voice filled with amazement. "Do not pursue," Yuki ordered. "Consolidate our position, begin evacuation of Concorde survivors, and get me a count of our losses." The count, when it came, was devastating. Nearly a third of the human fleet had been destroyed in the initial engagement. Hundreds of thousands of lives lost in a battle to save beings who had once wanted them. Dead Thexarin's ship approached the human flagship, requesting permission to dock. When he finally stood before Admiral Vasquez, the ancient counselor did something his species had not done in 10,000 years. He knelt. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "After everything we did to your people, after the exile, the mockery, the suffering, why would you come?" Yuki helped him to his feet, her expression neither angry nor triumphant. "Simply tired and sad and somehow still hopeful, because my grandmother made a promise. She said we would remember, and we do. But remembering does not mean hating. It means learning. It means becoming better." She looked out the viewport at the battered remains of both fleets. "This is not over," she continued. "The silence will return, stronger and more prepared. We have won a battle, not a war, but we have proven something today that matters more than any single victory." "What is that?" Thexarin asked. "That we can work together," Yuki replied. "That old wounds can heal. That the future does not have to be defined by the past." She extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship. "The war is just beginning, Counselor, but for the first time, humanity and the Concorde will face it together." Thexarin took her hand, feeling the weight of 2 centuries of history shifting in that single moment. The galaxy would never be the same. 12 years of battles that stretched across the galaxy, of worlds burned and rebuilt, of alliances forged in fire and sealed in blood, of losses so great that entire generations would carry the scars. Admiral Yuki Vasquez did not live to see the end. She fell in the Battle of the Core, leading the final assault against the Silence's home territory. Her flagship destroyed in the explosion that finally shattered the enemy's central intelligence. But before she died, she sent one final message to the combined human and Concorde fleet. "Finish it. Not for vengeance, not for glory, but for everyone who comes after. Give them a galaxy worth living in." The fleet obeyed. General Thomas Chun, Marcus Chun's grandson and Yuki's chosen successor, commanded the final campaign that drove the Silence from the galaxy forever. When it was over, when the last black ship had been destroyed, and the last corrupted system had been cleansed, he stood on the bridge of his battered vessel and wept. 300 billion humans had died in the war, more than had ever lived on Earth. Entire colony worlds had been sacrificed to buy time for evacuations. Families had been torn apart. Children had grown up knowing nothing but conflict, but they had won, the surviving. Concorde species gathered on the ruins of Axiom Prime for the first time since the war began, the Great Council Chamber where humanity had been exiled 2 centuries, and 12 years earlier lay in rubble, but they met there anyway, because it seemed right that the future should be decided in the place where so much had gone wrong. General Chun stood at the center of the gathered representatives, surrounded by the leaders of species that had once dismissed humanity as dangerous primitives. Counselor Thexarin, ancient and weary but still alive, spoke first. "We have come to discuss the new order of the galaxy," he said. "Humanity has earned the right to name its terms. Whatever you ask, we will grant." Territory, resources, leadership of the new council. All of it is yours if you wish it. Chun shook his head slowly. That is not what we want. Confusion rippled through the assembly. Then what? A Terra survivor asked. Reparations for the exile? Punishment for those who voted against you? Tell us, and it will be done. You still do not understand, Chun said. And there was something almost sad in his voice. After all this time, after everything we have been through together, you still think we are motivated by revenge. He looked around the ruined chamber, at the broken walls and shattered ceiling, at the place where his great-great-grandmother had stood alone against the contempt of 12 species. Admiral Vasquez left a message to be read at this moment. He continued. She recorded it before the final battle, knowing she might not survive. I would like to share it with you now. He activated the holographic display, and Yuki's image appeared. Tired and worn, but still carrying that spark of hope that had defined her entire life. If you are hearing this, the recording began. Then we have won. The silence is defeated, and the galaxy is free. I want to speak to those who survived, both human and Concord alike. Her image looked out at the assembly, with eyes that seemed to see through time itself. 2 centuries ago, my grandmother stood in this very chamber and warned the Concord that they were making a mistake. She told them that one day they would need humanity, and she told them we would remember. The recording paused as Yuki seemed to gather her thoughts. We did remember. We remembered every laugh, every insult, every child who died in the dead zones. We remembered the fear and the anger and the pain. But we also remembered something else. Her voice softened. We remembered that we are human. And being human means more than survival, more than strength, more than the ability to destroy our enemies. Being human means choosing who we want to be, even when hatred would be easier, even when vengeance would feel justified. She smiled then. That same small smile that her grandmother had worn in this chamber so long ago. We chose to save you, not because you deserved it, not because we owed you anything, but because letting you die would have cost us something more precious than any victory. It would have cost us our soul. The recording continued, so here is what humanity asks in return for our sacrifice. Nothing. Shock rippled through the assembly. We do not want your territory or your resources or your submission. We want something far more valuable. We want a partnership. A true alliance built on mutual respect and shared purpose. We want to work together to build a galaxy where no species is ever cast out, where no child is ever sent into the darkness to die, where the mistakes of the past are not forgotten but are learned from. Her image began to fade. My grandmother believed that humanity could be better than its worst impulses. She believed we could face cruelty with compassion and hatred with hope. Today, I ask you to help us prove her right. Not because you owe us, but because it is the right thing to do. The recording ended. Silence filled the ruined chamber. Then Dexeron rose again, his ancient body trembling with emotion. For 10,000 years, my species has led the Concord, he said. We have made decisions that shaped the galaxy, some good, some terrible. The exile of humanity was the worst mistake in our history, not because it failed to destroy you, but because it revealed the darkness in ourselves. He bowed his head. You have shown us what true strength looks like. Not the power to destroy, but the courage to forgive. The Axiom formally requests to join the new alliance as equal partners, not as leaders, not as elders, but as students willing to learn from those we once dismissed, one by one. The other surviving species made similar declarations. The Cathari, the Moradi, the Selenics, all of them acknowledging their past mistakes, all of them pledging to build something better. General Chun watched it happen with tears in his eyes. Then it is done, he said when the last declaration had been made. The old Concord is finished. In its place, we will build something new. A galactic compact where every species has a voice. Where no one is cast out for being different. Where we face the darkness together. He raised his hand in salute to the image of Admiral Vasquez that still lingered in the holographic display. The best revenge, my grandmother used to say, is a life well lived. Humanity took our exile and our suffering and our countless dead, and we turned it into salvation, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. The ceremony concluded, and the representatives dispersed to begin the long work of rebuilding. But before he left, Chun walked to the spot where Helena Vasquez had stood 2 centuries earlier, the place where humanity's exile had been pronounced. He knelt and placed a small metal plaque on the broken floor. It reads simply, "They sent us into the darkness. We brought back the light." Then he rose and walked out into a galaxy that finally, after 200 years of exile and 12 years of war, was ready to welcome humanity home, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as family, and somewhere in the stars. Across the vast distances of space and time, Helena Vasquez smiled. Her dream had finally come true.